Morning, Williza. Thanks for joining us today. Williza's our aged care specialist, and she's here today to talk to us about the new Aged Care Act, which is essentially some government regulation that's is it passed currently, or is it getting passed?
No, it has bipartisan support at the moment, so we expect it to go through. There might be some minor adjustments, but
Awesome. Okay, so it's basically on its way.
it's on its way.
Okay. For everyone's benefit, do you want to sort of talk a bit about yourself and your journey, and why aged care?
Sure. Well, I guess I've been in the financial planning industry. It's about 11 years now.
Yep.
And the reason I chose to specialise in aged care is I went through the system myself with my mum about 5 or 6 years ago. And I remember my very first phone call to my aged care. I called them up and they asked me, well, what do you want? And I didn't know what I want. I just wanted to know what there was.
Yeah.
And it's already such an emotional and stressful time. And I just thought if I could just help families navigate through the complexities of it, like how fulfilling would that be?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a pretty complex space, really, isn't it?
It is.
Yep.
It is.
Yep.
And I guess families who are going through it know how stressful it can be, and you just don't need all those additional, like there's a lot of jargon in aged care, and just I guess helping them understand what it means just takes some of that pressure off.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of decisions, I suppose, to be made along the way, and I guess what are the impacts of those decisions are not always necessarily clear whether you choose one option or another.
And I think it is valuable knowing what your options are and what help there is out there.
Yep.
And there are two parts to aged care. There's the support you get at home, and there's also residential care. But today we're going to just focus on the changes to residential care.
Yep, that's a good point, actually, because I think my very limited knowledge comparative to yours in terms of the aged care changes is I think that they were really kind of pushing for, or are pushing for, more in-home care, I suppose, rather than the residential piece.
Correct.
All right. So before we get too into the weeds, obviously, general advice disclaimer. This advice is general advice, doesn't take into account any of your objectives, financial situation or needs. And before doing anything, you should obviously come and talk to someone like Williza, who knows this in and out, back to front, so that you can make the right decision. All right. So, why are we here, Williza? Like, where have we been, and why is the government bringing in all these changes?
Well, there's a new Aged Care Act coming, and most of these changes will happen from 1st of July next year, 2025. In 2021, there was an Aged Care Royal Commission, and recommendations were made on how to improve the system.
Yep.
And one of the recommendations was to replace the Aged Care Act.
Yep.
Now, the current Act we've got more focuses around how facilities are subsidised, whereas the new Act focuses more on the person and what kind of care they need. So nearly 50% of aged care facilities are actually running at a loss.
Yeah, that stat when you told me the other day was like astounding, because I think the prevailing view out there is that there's all these businesses out there ripping people off, especially I suppose with all the press that's come out in the last couple of weeks around retirement villages and that sort of thing. I think the prevailing view is that they're all minting money, but obviously that's not the case.
No, it's not. And I guess no one really wants to associate aged care with profits.
Yep.
But the reality is if it's not profitable, we're not going to see the investment in the industry that we need to cater for Australia's increasing ageing population.
Yep.
And you're going to see corners being cut, not enough staff. And
and all of that affects quality of care, right? So
Exactly. So I guess the changes are designed to ensure that the industry is properly financed and that those that have the means will pay more for their own care.
Yep. Okay. Well, good. All right. So you'll see the slide that we're looking at now has a bit of a summary of, I guess, residential aged care fees, the structure. So can you run through what all of these mean?
So I guess the way to think of it, it's not too dissimilar to the fees that you and I pay living outside of an aged care home.
Yep.
So Chris, if you were to move homes, what options do you have?
I can rent, or I've got the option, I suppose, if I have the means to go and buy something.
Well, exactly. So the first box we're looking at is the accommodation payment.
Yep.
So people entering into aged care, they've got the option, do I want to buy the room or do I want to rent the room?
Yep.
If you rent, you don't get that money back.
Yep. Okay.
However, if you buy somewhere,
Yep.
generally you expect to receive some or all of your money back.
Yep.
Similar concept with aged care.
That's a really good way of describing it, I think.
Exactly, because there's all these technical terms for each of the ways to pay for it, but just think of it as either buying or renting the room.
Yeah, I'm going to use that. Thank you. Okay, so we've bought or rent the room, which puts a roof over our head, I guess, in that context. Then what?
So the next box, we've got the basic daily fee. And so this is, I guess you could call living expenses, so what you need to pay for food, electricity, laundry, cleaning. We pay the same fees.
Yep.
In aged care, the basic daily fee pays for these expenses.
Yep.
And that's set at 85% of the basic age pension.
Okay. Yep.
So it indexes every March and September.
Right, and then because that's aligned, I suppose, with the indexation of the age pension itself.
Correct.
Okay. Yep, good.
Next box, we have what we call a means tested fee, and this is the resident's contribution towards their cost of care, including the cost of staff providing the care supplies and equipment. Now, this fee depends on the level of income and assets a person has.
Okay.
So the more income and assets you have, the more you pay towards this fee.
Yep. And I think that's like pretty typical across most government systems, like I guess with the age pension. You know, if you have the means to self-support, obviously that reduces.
And lastly, we have what we call an additional services fee. So, for example, if you like a higher standard of, scotch with dinner,
Yep.
you would pay extra for that.
Good. Okay.
Same thing with aged care. So the government mandates a minimum level of services that a client must receive.
Yep.
And care providers can offer residents a higher standard of living. So say you like to get your hair done or
Yep.
you like better quality food or things like that.
Yep. And then obviously you've got the option to pay for those should you, one, have the means and two, have the want, I guess.
Correct. So these four, boxes just summarise the types of fees there are in the permanent aged care space.
Okay. Now, is this currently and going forward, or is this changing?
This will be changing. So the changes we'll go through will be for the accommodation payment.
Yep.
There'll be a change to the basic daily fee in terms of the hotelling supplement.
Yep.
And the means tested care fee and how that will be determined.
Okay.
There will be a change.
Right. So the boxes themselves are the same.
Mm-hmm.
The payments are the thing that's going to differ.
Correct.
Okay.
And the government estimates that under the new rules, we're expecting 50% of people to pay more under the new rules.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, I guess that comes back to profitability, I guess. So it needs to make this a viable industry because the demographics are such that we need it to exist. All right. So I guess, Williza, we're going to drop down into some detail of those four boxes that we just went through. So this is the first of those boxes, the accommodation payment. So can you, I guess, walk through some of the detail of the changes in that specific, I guess, area?
Sure. So from 1 January 2025, there's going to be an increase to the market price cap on accommodation deposits from $550,000 to $750,000, which will then be indexed.
Big jump.
It is. So if providers wish to charge a higher room price of more than $750,000, they'll need to obtain approval from the Independent Hospital and Aged Care Pricing Authority.
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
And to give you a bit of context, the current $550,000 cap was set in 2012.
Right.
And building and property prices have, of course,
Have
increased
gone up since then.
then.
Yep. So obviously, there's been no inflation increases. So that kind of, I guess, makes sense. But it's also a big hit for those who are thinking about entering aged care at the moment.
And that's not to say that every single facility will be raising the cost of their room to $750,000, but we can expect to see an increase in the number of facilities increasing their prices.
Yep. Okay. So an interesting one, I guess, suppose that we were talking about last week, which currently doesn't exist as my understanding, is the retention amount.
Correct. So they used to have retention amounts, I think, prior to 2014, and the government's going to bring these back.
Yep.
So what that means, and I've got an example here, if Margaret enters aged care and pays $750,000 for her accommodation deposit, the facility would be able to retain up to a maximum of $75,000 over the 5 years.
Yep. Okay. So that's incrementally taken, I
So
suppose.
it's 2% per year,
Yep.
charged monthly.
Okay. All right. So I guess if you're in there for 3 years, you're not. I guess the assumption shouldn't be that, because they can take, they're not going to. It's prorated across the journey of that 5-year period.
Correct.
Yep.
So if Margaret was in the facility for the full 5 years, the amount refundable if Margaret were to pass away to her estate would be $675,000.
Okay.
Whereas under the current rules, the estate would receive 100% of the deposit back.
Yeah. Okay. So that's another relatively sizable change. So I guess that's in the instance where we're buying our room. Let's walk through if we're renting our room.
Okay. So at the moment, the rent is based on a fixed rate on the date that you enter care, and it's currently set at 8.38%, which is what we call the MPIR.
Yep.
So if you opt to rent your room under the current rules, your rent will be calculated at 8.38% of any outstanding amount of the deposit you haven't paid.
Okay. Right. So it's almost like, the room cost is going to be X. Let's call it $500,000. I know. Let's not call it that, because let's call it $550,000. We haven't made any contributions towards that, so it would be 8.38. Was that the number? Yep. Percent on $550,000 would be the rent that you would pay.
Correct.
Okay.
And that MPRI rate is set upon the date of entry. So
It never changes.
We
Yeah,
have
wow.
residents who have entered when interest rates were only about 4%.
Yeah. Wow. So their rent. So, but then also, I suppose and I'm trying not to apply current financial context, but I guess let's say interest rates are going to, we predict are going to fall into the future, that if you go into aged care now, you're set at 8.38% for the remainder of your...
Correct.
Yep, okay.
Correct. So under the new rules, the DAP rate, so DAP is what we call the daily accommodation payment, which we can also refer to as rent.
Rent, yep.
The DAP rate will become a floating rate and will change twice a year with indexation. So it does create some uncertainty with cash flow planning.
Yeah, that's true.
And we're still waiting on clarification on how the DAP rate will be calculated.
Yep.
So we're not sure if they'll use the MPIR rate or it'll be something else.
Interesting. Okay.
Still waiting.
Yep. Yeah, well, that was going to be my main question, is what's that linked to? So, okay. So there's no certainty there.
No.
But yeah, really valid point there around uncertainty about cash flow planning. So,
Correct.
yeah, for those who are... Because I guess this is part of the planning aspect too, from, I guess, our perspective or your perspective, is when we're looking at especially clients who maybe don't want to sell the family home, for example, and therefore that's their funding for the purchase of the room. You'd essentially take the renting option. So the cash flow analysis that we do based on that kind of obviously will change really. So, but anyway,
Correct.
I don't want to get stuck into it too much.
And just as a side note, the government is considering phasing out RADs and RACs, so these accommodation deposits, from 2035, and are hoping to move towards more of a DAP model, which is just renting the room.
Yep. Okay. So there'll be no choice. It'll be you just pay for whatever the room cost is.
Yeah, and that's still just a consideration, but it's something to be mindful about.
Yeah. Be interested to see why, the logic behind that, but obviously it's just a consideration. But anyway. All right. So this is the second
Box.
Box, yeah, thank you. I was looking for the word there. So we've moved away from buying or renting the room. We're now in the room.
Yes.
And we need to pay for our basic care, or what we're going to call basic daily fee.
So this is living expenses.
Yep.
So it's food, cleaning, laundry.
Yep.
That's what this box is for.
Yep.
Currently, it's set at 85% of the age pension, which is $63.57 per day. As mentioned before, it's indexed in March and September. So there's going to be no change to the basic daily fee moving forward from 1 July 2025. However, there will be a change to what we call the hotelling supplement. So currently the government pays for the hotelling supplement, and this supplement helps facilities meet the costs of employing staff for catering, cleaning and gardening, and it is $12.55 per day.
Okay.
So if residents have assessable assets over $238,000 or a high income or a combination of the two, they will be asked to contribute towards this fee.
Yeah, okay. All right. Excellent. So I guess I've got my brain's going into strategy mode here, is around, I guess, accessible assets. So that's something to consider from a planning perspective. I guess when you're looking at client situations, that's a key number.
Correct.
Yep.
And the maximum fee of $12.55 is expected to apply when clients have accessible assets of about $297,000, and we're excluding income there.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. So on to the next box.
So this box was all to do with care fees.
Okay.
So at the moment, we have what we call a means-tested care fee. This is going to be abolished from 1 July 2025.
Right. Okay.
And it's going to be replaced with a new means-tested system.
Okay.
And what we're going to have is the government will pay for all clinical care and nursing services for aged care residents, no matter how much money they have.
Yeah, right. Okay. That's good, I guess.
However, residents will be required to pay more for help with things like getting dressed, showering and activities, so non-clinical care.
Okay. All right. Excellent.
And this non-clinical care contribution will start to kick in when clients have accessible assets of about $503,000 or very high income.
Okay.
So under the current system, taxpayers actually pay 76% of this cost.
Yeah, wow.
Under the new rules, the government will be shifting about 3% on average to the person in care. So it will still be heavily subsidised.
Yep. Okay. But I guess that's where the potential increase in cost for those in care, where this will occur as an increase in regular contributions versus talking about the buying or the renting the room. Okay.
So under the new rules, we're going to have a daily cap of $101.16, whereas under the current rules, the cap was $417 per day.
Yep. Okay.
And under the new rules, there will no longer be an annual cap, whereas currently there isn't an annual cap. So what we were finding with high net worth clients is at the start of the year, they were essentially bleeding cash flow up to that $417 per day. Then they'd reach that annual cap, and then for the rest of the year, they didn't have to pay the means-tested care fee. And then again, the next year it would start.
Yeah, same thing. Yep.
So I guess with the new rules, it'll just even that out a bit.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
And this is a big one. The current lifetime cap for the means-tested care fee is about $82,000. Under the new rules, this is going to increase to $130,000, or if the person has been in permanent care for 4 years, whichever occurs first.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty key one, isn't it? Especially for those who have in today's parlance, a means-tested fee. It just means over the journey is that I guess they're up for more funding.
Correct. And these figures, of course, are based on current government guidelines and they're subject to indexation.
Yep. Okay. That one's a pretty interesting one, actually, because I know from some of the clients we've worked on together that lifetime cap is a key consideration for planning, where you sort of look at it and go, okay, well, where do the contributions stop? And what does that mean from an overall asset perspective? Because I think one of the one of the probably more common scenarios is that you've got one of a partnership entering aged care and the other one's potentially not. And then we'll still need to consider the fact that the partner who's not entering aged care has their own needs in terms of housing, in terms of living, in terms of care. So that number's quite important because it has a big effect on just the level of assets that are then remaining for the partner who's not entering aged care. So yeah, there's a lot to consider.
And I guess just to add to that, if the spouse is remaining in the home, for the purposes of calculating what this fee will be, the home will be exempt because that spouse will be considered a protected person.
Okay. Which is important, right? And I guess this comes down to, why the planning aspect is so valuable is because, as you said before, it's about options. So
and there's so many intricacies under all this. And
you might be looking at an option saying, well, what do I do? Do I stay? Do I leave? And it might be a combination of both, but it's important to work out what the timing is because that will then affect your assessment in this area. So, yeah. All right. So, Williza, you've put together a bit of a residential care fee example here for Margaret as our hypothetical client. Do you want to walk through, I guess, what this means for Margaret?
Sure. So Margaret has a home valued at $800,000. So under the rules for determining how much she needs to pay towards her aged care, the value of her home is actually capped at about $206,000.
Okay, from a asset assessment perspective. So they take, is that a percentage or is that
It's just a set rate, $206,000, and that will remain the same under the new rules as well.
Okay.
However, if Margaret had a spouse living in that home, it would be fully exempt.
Okay.
So that amount would be zero.
Okay. All right.
But since Margaret is single, it's $206,000. Margaret also has home contents of $5,000 and $400,000 in the bank. Now, Centrelink applies a deeming amount to determine how much income she's earning from that $400,000 in the bank.
Okay.
It's not necessarily reflective of how much she is actually earning. Centrelink uses an assumption.
A deeming rate, yeah. So I suppose for those who don't know or aren't or aware of Centrelink's assessment, so any asset could be cash, property, a portfolio, shares, I don't know, whatever it looks like. It doesn't really matter. If it's outside the family home, they deem it as a financial asset and they apply a set deeming rate and that works out that $7,758 figure. It's just based on, what your asset number is.
Correct. And Margaret's also receiving about $22,000 in the age pension. So under the current rules, her basic daily fee is $63.57 per day and she pays a means-tested care fee of $14.31 per day, which means her care fees are about $77.80 per day. However, under the new rules, we still have a basic daily fee. There's no change there. However, based on her assets and income, she will need to pay the full hotelling supplement of $12.55 per day.
Okay.
And the non-clinical care contribution, which essentially replaces the means-tested care fee, will be $23.16 per day, resulting in a total daily fee of about $99 per day.
Wow.
So that's an increase of about $21, and over a day, and over the year, it's an increase in fees of about $7,800.
Yeah, it's a relatively significant number. I think I was just in my head trying to do the math on the percentage increase, and I think it's somewhere sort of in the 16 to 20% range of increase in cost. But that makes sense, right? Because it needs to be funded from somewhere. So
it does.
So, Williza, if anyone's got any questions from this and they want to reach out to you, how do they get hold of you?
Well, you just call our office.
Okay, awesome, excellent. And we'll obviously put you through to Williza, and then she'll be able to have a conversation with you about, what's the best path to follow. But thanks for your time.
No worries.
Very enlightening.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. Lots of changes going on. But hopefully we'll speak to some of you soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.